morning, everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar where we are going to be talking about payroll year end. My name is Pam Scott, and I will be hosting your webinar today. Just a little bit of housekeeping. Your phone lines will be muted during the presentation, but you will have the opportunity to ask questions. So there is a Q&A section where you can type in your questions. I will get to as many of those as I can. If it's something that's going to get into a very lengthy conversation, what I will do is make a note of your question and I will follow up with you after the session. And if there's a lot of questions, we'll get to as many as we can during the allotted time. If we are unable to get to all of the questions during the session today, go ahead and type those in and I will follow up with everyone individually after the session. So the first thing that we're going to do is I'm going to go through some information. I'm going to use a PowerPoint. There's a lot of information there. So we'll go through and basically kind of talk about year end, the differences in the legacy payroll versus the payroll 2.0 that started with version 2018, and go through the information. One of the things that we will be talking about today and actually demoing in Sage 100 is how to create a historical company and copy data. As we'll discuss later in the presentation, that is only required on legacy versions. So if you are on a newer version, it's not required. So we're going to do this at the end so that if there are any folks that don't need this, they can go ahead and drop off the presentation. But anyone is welcome to stay on the session when we go into this at the end. So hopefully everyone can hear me. And we will go ahead and get started. So what is required to process the W-2s for Sage 100 or Sage 100 Cloud? As you know, the product is now called Sage 100 Cloud. Throughout this presentation, I will probably say Sage 100. Those terms are interchangeable. So in order to process W-2s, you do need to be on a supported version of Sage 100. And those are the either the 2018, 2019, or 2020 versions. And that would be Payroll 2.0. Now, we'll talk a little bit if you're still running an older version, if you have questions about how, using Atrix this year, we can still go through that and answer all of those questions. Typically, if there is an interim release download at the end of the year, it could be related to W-2 changes, it could be related to 1099 changes, anything of that nature. Sage typically does not release that until around the 19th of December at the very earliest. As I recall, last year it was quite late. It was closer to year end. At this point, we do not know if there is going to be an interim release download, anything that will be required specifically for payroll. The other thing is, if you need assistance with installing any updates, or assistance with year end in general, everyone should have received an email from us. Actually, there have been 2 email blasts that have gone out in November where you can fill out a form and return that to us requesting year end assistance. And that would be related to W-2s and 1099s. So if you have not yet requested assistance, I encourage you to go ahead and do that so that we can get you on the schedule. Our slots do fill up rather quickly. And if you did not get that email from us, then please follow up with an email to me and I will make sure that you get that information. So what is required in doing your W-2s? As you all know, unless you're very new to Sage, Atrix is what is used to print your W-2s and or to do any e-filing. And the Atrix e-filing and reporting does need to be installed on the user's workstations, and they have to have sufficient permissions on that workstation to be able to download updates to Atrix. So, you know, as you get close to the end of the year, when you get into Atrix, it will have updates that it will want you to download related to the year end for 2020. You also do have to be current on your Sage subscription plan in order to be able to have access to Atrix. If you let your subscription plan with Sage expire, then you will no longer have access to be able to get to the Atrix product. You also have to have an active internet connection in order to use Atrix. So this is just a reminder of a change that came about in 2018 in case you are new to payroll. And this is related to Kentucky and the e-filing changes in Kentucky. So they lowered the threshold back in 2018 so that if you are issuing more than 26 W-2 forms, and you'll notice that this also includes 1099s, that they do have to be filed electronically. So you do have to e-file. You cannot turn in the paper copies. This is older information, so the information is actually would be January 31 of 2021. I apologize that I didn't get that changed on this document, but this is the old information that I pulled from 2018. So I just wanted everyone to be aware. A lot of times when I'm scheduling year-end appointments, I'll confirm with the client that they are not required to e-file, and occasionally I'll get the question that says, well, I'm not really sure if we're required to or not. So there are requirements for e-filing federal, which I believe that threshold is now 50 W-2s, and but Kentucky's threshold for e-filing is lower and is now 26 or more. If you have employees that are in states outside of Kentucky, then you will need to go to that that local, that state's IRS site or get with your CPA to determine if you were required to e-file for those areas. So if anybody has any questions about the e-filing or what those limits are, please just go ahead and type your question in. And now we're going to talk about tax table updates. So everything we're going to talk about today is going to be talking about the old payroll, which is basically version 2017 and below, or the new business framework, which is payroll 2.0, which includes the versions 2018, 2019, and 2020. So if you are using payroll 2.0, you know that it now uses the new tax calculation engine, and it automatically updates your federal and state and your locals. So there is no need for us to install a tax table update for you at the end of the year. Now, you will be responsible if your unemployment rate changes or things of that nature. You will be responsible for making that change yourself because that percentage varies from company to company, but the basic tax calculations should update. If for any reason you have a new local municipality that has a first-time ever local tax, then that probably will not be in the new tax calculation engine right away. It does take them a little while to get that set up based upon when the information is submitted. So if you do have a situation like that, go ahead and bring it to our attention so that we can escalate that to Sage to make sure that that does get taken care of. So if you're on 2018, 2019, or 2020, you do not have to worry about updating the tax tables. That will be done automatically at any time when there's a new update. If you're running a non-supported version of Sage in 2017 or lower, you still have the ability to manually update the tax tables. So if you're, it may be something that you've been used to doing previously where you just update them yourself. In the past, we have always been able to print out the setups out of Sage for you and provide them so that you knew what the new federal limits were, the new states that you needed, the states that you report, that you would have all that information, and then we could walk you through and show you how to change that. This year, we will not have the ability to print that out for you because Sage will no longer be providing that because those are considered unsupported versions, so they're not issuing any tax tables at all. It's managed differently now. So you will need to get, the Circular E or whatever documentation that you need to determine what those federal changes are and any state changes. OASIS can still assist you in showing you how to change that within the tax table maintenance if you need assistance. We just will not be able to provide you with a printout any longer. And the final thing is if you are still running an unsupported version of Sage 100, especially if you have payroll, I would strongly encourage you to get upgraded as quickly as possible. Now, obviously, there's not time to get that upgrade completed before the end of the year, but I can start the upgrade process and the pre-upgrade analysis before the end of the year, and then get you scheduled in Q1 of 2021 to get that upgrade taken care of. So I'll leave this open. Does anyone have any questions about the tax table updates? If you do, go ahead and just enter those questions in, and I will be glad to answer those. Okay, so we're going to move on. So now we're going to just go through some general questions. And if you've been using Sage for a while, you're probably pretty familiar with Atrix. But if you're not familiar with Atrix, some people will ask, okay, I'm going to stop for just a moment and go back and look at this question. Okay, it was, the question is, how do you determine what version you were on? If you go into Sage 100 and you go up to the top toolbar and you click on Help and then scroll down and click on About, it will then tell you what version you are running. So it will say either something like, the newer versions are like the 2018 version is also called 6.0. So that's where you can determine the version that you're running. And if you do have payroll, it should also let you know what payroll version that you're running. If you go and look at Help and About and it says Mass 90 or Mass 200, then you definitely are on a much older version that would not be supported. So if you need any more assistance in finding that, just let me know and I'll be glad to walk you through it. So people will say, well, do I have to e-file when using Atrix? And the answer to that is no. Atrix is a third-party web-based add-on that comes with your Sage 100, and that's where you're used to going and printing your quarterly reports and so forth. And this is the program that you use to print your W-2s. If you are going to physically print them yourself, then there is no fee to do that. The fees would come into play if you are going to be e-filing. If you do e-file state or federal, there are fees for that processing. And I've listed a website here that you can go to determine what those fees are. If you have multiple companies, maybe you're an accounting firm or a CPA firm or consultant, and you do payroll for multiple companies, Atrix also offers bundled options where you can save money. Now, I will add, and I believe this is on another slide in just a moment, you can have Atrix do everything, meaning that they will process the W-2s for you and get those to your employees in addition to e-filing. And there obviously is a fee for that. But I'm finding that we're having more clients, more and more clients actually choose this option because they find in the long run it's actually more cost effective because you're not buying the forms and the envelopes. You're not taking the time to print them out, stuff the envelopes, the postage. And to date, I have had no complaints or issues with anyone having any problems with Atrix getting those out to their employees in a timely manner or anything like that. So I'm not aware of any issues that any of our clients have had. So that's something you may want to consider because it certainly, in the long run, saves you money and it saves a lot of time and effort. So again, that's up to you, but you do have that option. Okay. So when you're ordering forms, if you are going to physically print them yourself, you do not buy pre-printed W-2 forms. Atrix requires the blank perforated 4-up packet. Okay? So just make sure that you are ordering the correct form. And again, here's just a little note that depending on how many W-2s you process, you might want to consider Atrix just doing it all for you. But again, do not get the pre-printed forms. So this is a whole lot of information about forms. I can send you a link to this if you prefer. Feel free to do a screenshot, but this basically is just talking about the forms. Now, I will tell you that in ordering the forms, you can order these forms directly from Sage, and you've probably already received emails, advertising and promoting their forms and purchasing the forms from Sage. You certainly can do that, but you do not have to purchase them through Sage. You can go to your local, if you have a printer that does all of your forms, you can go to any office supply place, Office Depot, things of that nature, and purchase the forms yourself. So sometimes I hear that Sage might be cheaper on their forms than maybe Office Depot or someone like that, but it's certainly up to you where you want to purchase those forms. As long as they're the blank perforated 4-up, then you're certainly able to get those wherever you choose. So the other thing I wanted to talk about is ACA reporting, the Affordable Care Act. Sage does, through Atrix, you are able to do your ACA reporting. If you have never done the ACA reporting before, I would encourage you to watch these, they're older webinars that we have on our website, but they are still applicable. And we have 5 different videos and that goes through the entire process. This will allow you to become familiar with the process and also to help you prepare. We obviously can help you with doing the entire process. And that's one of the questions that we ask on our year-end emailer, is if you do need assistance with ACA. The ACA requirements tend to change year to year on how many employees, if you're over a certain number of employee level, that you are required to do ACA reporting. And I believe the limit is 50 I believe, per company. If you are unsure if you are required to do ACA reporting, you need to check either with your CPA or get with the representative from your insurance company and ask them based on your numbers if you are required to do ACA reporting. I do know that some insurance companies and brokers, this is a part of the service that they do offer to their clients. So this may be something that they would do for you. But you do need to check with them to determine if you're required, if you do not know. So again, if you just go out to our website, which is oasisky.com, and go to the Learn section and videos, you kind of have to scroll down the list, but you will find all 5 of these videos on our website. So just checking to see, we don't have any more questions at the moment. Just know that currently our holiday schedule is we'll be closed a half a day on Christmas Eve, we'll be closed on Christmas Day, and then we'll also be closed on January 1st. And everyone will be sending out an email blast with our holiday business hours probably within a couple of weeks. So wanted to just kind of mention a couple of things to you before we get into the creating of the historical company. As most of you are probably aware, starting in 2020, the government created a new W-4 form and a new process for that. It supposedly was not mandatory for you to start using the new reporting, which basically takes away your dependence for existing employees, but you were supposed to use that if you had any new hires. That W-4 form is only available in the supported versions of Sage 100. So if this is a form that you never, you didn't really worry about it in 2020, and you, but you want to get it added to your system so that you can start using it in 2021, then just let us know and we can install the service update for that. Also, just a quick reminder for any of you that are on the 2018 version of Sage 100, your version will be retiring in 2021. So I will be reaching out to everyone to talk with you about upgrading next year. And if you are one of the early adopters and want to get on the schedule quickly, go ahead and reach out to me so that you can get ahead of the curve and the rush to upgrade. But the 2018 version will be retiring next year. It technically will be retired when the 2021 version is released, and Sage has not provided us with a release date yet. So when Sage retires that version, what that basically means to you is that they will no longer provide direct support through Sage. They also will no longer be issuing any new service updates, patches, or fixes for that particular version. Oasis will continue to provide you with technical support until you do have the opportunity to get upgraded. So we don't cut you off. The only issue would be if it was an issue where we needed assistance from Sage, they would not help us with that. But typically, our team, with our experience, we're able to manage that without having to get with Sage. But just wanted everybody to be aware that the 2018 version will be retiring sometime next year. So my guess is probably Q2, but again, we have not received the information from Sage. We are not doing, we talked about the ACA and how you can go out and watch those videos. We are not doing, because of time constraints, an actual demo of how to use Atrix. If I would say the majority of our clients have been using it for several years. But if it's your first year, you definitely want to get assistance from us and just send in that year-end request. So we've talked about Atrix, we've talked about ACA, we've talked about the W-4 form. Just to reiterate, at this date, I am not sure if there is going to be an interim release download required for W-2s for the 2020 reporting year. And as soon as we are made aware, we will be sending out an email blast to all of our payroll clients. And then finally, for any of you that are going to be dropping off before we get into the creating the historical company, is that if you need year-end assistance, whether it's help with Atrix, ACA, you're on an older version and you need assistance creating that historical company, any of those things, you should have, as I mentioned earlier, you should have received at least 2 emails from us in November. So there was a link to a form that you filled out, and then that comes to our support team, and then I follow up with a phone call individually with every person to get you scheduled. So far, there's only one request that came in earlier today that I have not followed up with. So if you want assistance, please don't wait so that we can make sure we get you scheduled in a timely manner. If you did not receive that email, please email me at pam@oasisky.com, and I will be glad to send you another copy of that. So to talk about creating the historical companies and copying data, let me explain to you who needs to do this and who does not need to do this before we get into the Sage 100. If you are on the new payroll 2.0, again, which is 2018, 2019, or 2020 of Sage 100, you are no longer required to create those historical companies. If you remember, in the older versions, you could not, let's see, how do I want to say this? In the older versions, you had to, after your last payroll of the year and before your first payroll of the year, you had to create a historical company and copy your payroll data over. You did that because you have to close the fourth quarter before you can do the first payroll of the new year, and it basically erased your year-to-date history. So for instance, let's say that you're on the 2017 version of Sage still. You will have to create, after your last payroll, a historical company, copy your data over before you close your year end. And then what we do is then when we help you with Atrix and processing your W-2s, we use the data in the history in the historical company. So if you're not on a current version of Sage, the process that you have done for the past several years is still applicable. If you are on a new version of Sage, the Sage 100 payroll now tracks the history differently. So you can close Q4 of 2020, start processing payroll for Q1 of 2021, and you can go back at any point and pull history reports and also do your W-2 reporting, your ACA, whatever you need. So it is not required that you create that historical company. We have a few people that still, it's always been their process and they still want to do it regardless. We have some clients that always do it at the end of every quarter regardless. So you still can do that within Sage in the newer versions, but it is not required. So what I'd like to do is open it up to see if anyone has any questions about that historical company. And then if there are no questions, what I'm going to do then is I'm going to switch over to Sage 100 and walk through that process. And if there's anyone that's on newer versions of Sage that does not need to see this, you can feel free to drop off of the session at any time. So I'm just going to leave it open for just a second while I'm moving to another screen, and let me know if you have any questions. Okay, all right, so I'm not seeing anything. For the person that asked earlier about checking the version of Sage, now for my demo for payroll today, I'm using an older version, but you go to Help, and then you go to About, and then you go to Sage 100, and then it's going to show you the version that you're running. So it'll say you're on 2018, 2019, and then it also gives you the corresponding 6.x version. Okay. All right. So again, creating this historical company, you want to do it after everything has been completed for the 2020 payroll. So it would be your last payroll, if you do any bonus checks, if you're having to record any third-party sick pay, anything like that, anything that is going to affect a W-2 for the current reporting year, you want to make sure that you have all of that completed before you create your historical company. So to create the historical company, you're going to go into the Library Master, you're going to go into Company Maintenance, and the first thing you're going to do is you're going to create the new company code. And if you have one company, you know, we always suggest that you put in Y for year and then put what year you're creating. If you have multiple companies in Sage, then you might use the first letter of the company code. Whatever naming convention that you want to use is fine. So you're going to put in that code. You're going to put in the company name, and I got a question, so hold on for me just a second. So the question is, do you have to close the fourth quarter of 2020 before you do the first payroll of 2021? And the answer to that is yes. That has not changed. You always have to close the prior quarter before you can process in the next quarter. So if you're on an older version and you're going to be printing your W-2s from this historical company, in the company name, you actually want to put the true company. You don't want to put copy of 2020 payroll, because when it processes the W-2s, it's going to pull data from this company information. So you do want to go ahead and fill out the address information, because again, that's going to print. I'm not going to take the time to fill all of this out, but fill out your complete information with your city and state. It is imperative that you put in your federal ID and your state ID numbers. So you want to make sure that you do that. And so you're going to get all of this set up. And then the first thing that you need to do is you either need to accept it. What I usually do is I click Activate, and it tells me it has to be saved first. So I'm going to say, yes, I want to save it. Now it's asking me which modules I want to activate. The minimum requirement is you have to do the common information, you have to do general ledger, and then if all we're doing is payroll, then you would select the payroll module. That's certainly up to you. If you want to copy everything, you can, but if you're just doing it for payroll purposes, then just select payroll. But Sage does require that you activate common information and general ledger regardless of what you're copying. So I'm going to activate these modules, and I'm going to click Proceed. So what it's doing now is it's created the company code, and now it's creating those blank data files for the module. Okay? At this point, I want to remain in my company code that I've just created, and I want to click the copy button. And this is an area where you want to be extremely careful because you can wipe out data. So again, you kind of get a warning, make sure that you're, doing everything you need to do. It's going to ask for your source company. This is the company that you're copying from. And then it should show your destination is Y20, because this is the company we are in. Double and triple check this, because if you copy the wrong way, you literally run the risk of removing data. So what I always suggest to people is once you finish that last payroll and all of your entries for the year, I would get a good backup. Make sure just you have a good system backup in general, and then go through this process. Because if you accidentally copy the wrong way and remove data, the only way to get that back is going to be through restoring. So again, it's going to, I double check. I'm copying from my ABC company. My destination, I'm copying to my Y20 company. And then it asks, what data do you want to copy? Well, I only activated common information, the general ledger, and payroll. So I'm going to just unselect all of these boxes instead of doing it individually. And again, common information, general ledger, required, and then I'm going to add payroll. Once I've made my selection, I'm going to double check again, make sure I'm copying the right way, and I'm going to click Proceed. What it's going to do now is it's going to copy all of those data files, the modules that I've selected from ABC to Y20. So yes, I want to do this. Now, it just took me a second because I have very little data out there. Depending on how much data, it may take a little bit longer. I would suggest that you don't have a payroll in process when you're doing this. You don't want anybody working in payroll when you're doing this, so you make sure you get all of the information. At this point, once you have copied the information, you should go into the new company, and you should go to the payroll module, and you should go in and, let's see, this is telling me, do I want to update the new payroll tax? I'll just say no to that. And I have payroll data entry in progress. What you should do is you should go into employee maintenance and randomly select some employees and look at their pay history, look at their earnings for the year. And I picked a bad person, but just to make sure everything looks the same. You also should maybe go into, I would go into your reports and maybe print a quarterly tax report, do a summary of a check history report, and then do the same thing in your live company. In my instance, it would be the ABC company. Compare the reports, compare the numbers. Make sure the numbers match. Make sure that when you're going into employee maintenance or you're running these reports, an error message doesn't pop up. And just confirm that everything copied properly before you close the end of the year. So again, double, triple check, and just make sure that everything is correct. Again, this is only applicable and only mandatory if you are running version 2017 or below. If you are running 2018, 19, or 2020, it is not required. You still can do it. There's no problem if you want to do that, which I just did in the 2018 version. There's no issue with that at all, but it is not required. It's totally user preference whether or not you want to do that. So that takes us through creating that historical company. And you should do that for any live company that you process payroll in. The process would be the same. So if you have multiple companies, then you're going to create one company, copy the data over, then you're going to go in and create the next historical company and copy that data over. So I'm going to open it up and see if there are any additional questions at this point. And if there are no questions, that will conclude the presentation for payroll today. We do have another presentation at 2 p.m. today where we're going to be talking about accounts payable and 1099s. If you haven't registered for that, please do. Also, the session, if you attended today, you will be getting a follow-up email within the next day or two with a link to the recording of the session. So please feel free to share with any employees. It'll also be posted on our website, but you will receive a link to the recording. And then also there will be another presentation just like this next Wednesday. The payroll presentation will be at 2 p.m. So there's still time to register if you have other folks that want to review this, this presentation or attend. So I do not have any additional questions at this point. Again, if you're on an older version, an unsupported version, I encourage you to get in touch with me so that we can talk about what's involved in an upgrade and get the process started so that we can get you upgraded fairly quickly. Can you touch on the closing of a quarter in case they're missing anything? Yes. And hopefully, let's look at my payroll data here. I won't have, sorry. When you're going in to do period end processing, you have your federal and state reporting, which is basically going to take you out to Atrix. Your period end report selection, these are reports that you have already determined that you want to print at the end of the year. So on older versions, all of the reports are listed there, and you can pick and choose. With the newer version, you actually can create a default screen and choose which reports that you want. So if you wanted to do the quarterly tax report, and we'll do the standard report, and if you wanted to do the workers' compensation report, you can do that as well. This report setting is, you do have the ability to modify those standard reports in the newer versions. So you may have your own version of the workers' comp. So this is going to ask you what reports you want to print at the end of the year. And so you're going to go through and you would print any of the reports that you need. And then you're literally going to go into period end processing. And I have payroll data entry in this company in process, so bear with me just a second. Okay, let's see if that gets me what I need. Okay. So what it's going to come up with, and I'm working in a prior calendar year, it's going to come up and say period end and year end because it's going to know that you're in the fourth quarter. Will be performed, it should say, for quarter 4 ending 12/31 of 2020. It's going to ask if you want to print your period end reports, which would be the reports that you've made in this selection. At this point, in the period end screen that you're seeing here is going to be the same if you're on an unsupported version or a new version. So you want to make sure that you understand which quarter that it's closing and which year, and then you're going to click proceed. If you're on an older version and you click proceed, then it is going to wipe out your year-to-date history. You can't just arbitrarily go back into the payroll options and set it back up to Q4 of 2020. You can set it that way, but it is not going to bring your history back. And at that point, I'm not going to print these reports today. You're going to go ahead and click proceed. It kind of gives you another warning that it's going to close period 4. It's going to change it to period 1. Have you printed all of your reports, and are you sure you want to do this? So if you're like, oh gosh, I'm not sure I printed my reports, you can say no. If you say yes, then it's going to go through and do that period end processing. So it's really the same process that you've done before, and that you do at the end of each quarter. There's really nothing. There's really nothing more to the screens that you click. So, Danny, if that didn't answer your question, feel free to go ahead and add something else. And I'll also open it up to any additional questions that you may have. Okay, great. If anybody else has any questions before we end the session, feel free to go ahead and type them in. If you think of something after the session, please feel free to send me an email at pam@oasisky.com. Also, if you're going to need year-end assistance with W-2 printing, e-filing, ACA, making sure you have the new W-4 form. Also, if anyone has allowed their employees to take the FICA deferral due to COVID, there is a patch that has to be installed in order to be able to report that properly. So please let us know if you have done that. Other than one client, no one else that I'm aware of has gave their employees that option. So, but if you did give them the option to defer, your employees to defer the FICA, there is some additional reporting that is now available for Sage, and we do have to load an update for that. So, not seeing any more questions. So, oops, one more here. Okay, so Danny said he hasn't been using the new W-4. He's just been typing the number of dependents. I think that is okay. I can't swear to it. I know if you're giving them the form, if you're physically giving them the new form that that you can generate through Sage and Atrix, it wouldn't have where they have all of those options. But if that's working for you, then I would assume that's okay. I just can't speak to that personally, whether or not your CPA or the IRS would have an issue with that. Does anybody else have any questions? Let's see. Okay. All right. Leave it open for just another second to see if anybody else has any questions. Otherwise, if we don't speak before the end of the year, everyone have a safe holiday season, and please try to stay healthy. And if there's anything that we can ever be of assistance with, please let us know. So I'm not seeing any more questions, so I'm going to go ahead and end the webinar. And thank you all.